help is when I'm ocean waves.
Well, today on Handicappers Insight podcast, I have trainer Gina Rarick, an American who is based in France and trains racehorses. Gina, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, of course. Well, just to give you a brief introduction, because your story is extraordinary. You were from Wisconsin, a dairy farm in Wisconsin, and you dropped out of music school, at least briefly. You became a journalist, and you worked in Milwaukee in the financial bureau of a newspaper. Ended up at the International Herald Tribune in the Paris office. You chose Paris over Britain because it's easier to get your animals through quarantine there. Became a journalist for many years. By the way, one of my favorite journalists is Samuel Apt. He used to write cycling.
Ah, yeah, Sam Apt of Tour de France fame.
Yeah, he's great. Many more races now. I love him. So, but anyway, you started riding amateur races in France, which we have also in America. You're allowed to train a number of horses as an amateur that you own yourself, which you did. And then one day, even though you hadn't won that many races as an amateur, you decided to quit your job at the International Herald Tribune because I guess they were calling you too much in the afternoon, and you decided to become a public trainer, and you've been doing that ever since. Did I get the big picture pretty?
That's the big picture, pretty right, pretty more or less correct. Yeah. I did love the newspaper business. Don't get me wrong. I loved being a journalist. I worked in Milwaukee. I worked in Chicago, and then the job in Paris came up. I wanted to move abroad somewhere, and I was thinking about either England or Germany or even Tokyo came up, and I worked there for a little bit. And the Paris job just kind of opened up, and wasn't a place that I had planned on going, but the job was a good one. Didn't speak a word of French. Got off the plane not knowing even how to say bonjour or merci, and just kind of jumped into the deep end. So it was a really fantastic place to work. But in about 2005, this thing we call the internet, which we all rely on way too much in our lives, kind of took over and killed newspapers as we know them. And I'm kind of old fashioned. I'm a print journalist, this sort of nonstop budget cutting, get it out there first and get it online. It changed the way of working that I wasn't really happy about. And I started to get more and more interested in racehorses at the same time, because I was, as you said, I was training as an amateur and trying and doing that next to the newspaper job. And I was finding that a whole lot more interesting, actually. So in 2008, the paper was cutting back a bit and they offered buyouts. And I thought, well, I'm 45 years old. And if I wait 10 years, it's not going to happen, or even 5. Things get a lot harder to start when you're 50, unfortunately, than when you're just a little bit below that. So when I was 45 years old, I left the paper and took out a public license. Now, people who I know who are friends who were already public trainers said, you're out of your mind. Don't do that. They were right. But I'm really glad I did. It's been an amazing experience, and it's not an easy business. It's not without its frustrations, but I do love it. And so here we are.
What struck me right away is in America, people that train horses and to some extent own horses, even though syndicates have changed that, are folks, the generations in the game. Their parents train horses, their uncle, their family members. We don't have a lot of new folks that work on the backstretch as trainers. It's almost always folks that came from the business. Is that much different in France and in Europe?
It's the same here. It's either their generations in the business. So I came as a complete outsider, which is a massive handicap to overcome, because a lot of these trainers, either they grew up in a family that was training, or they had connections there. They have family that works for Coolmore, or they have a wife that works for Godolphin, or they have connections that kind of bring them that business. And coming from on the financial news desk of the International Herald Tribune wasn't exactly a calling card to attract owners. So it's definitely a dynastic and business here as well.
So being kind of from the outside, does it help you in that you approach problems in a different way? is there a strength and a benefit to not doing things the way everyone else has done them for many, many years?
I think there really is. And because that's one of the things we see in racing, and you see it in America, you see it everywhere. Oh, why do you do it that way? Well, because we always did. That's the answer. And as a journalist, I'm trained to ask questions and try to get some critical thinking and try to say, well, why would you do it that? Well, what's the science behind it? What's, and because I came late to the business and from the outside, I read voraciously everything. And I did get the chance at the Herald Tribune. I mean, I didn't come into this completely cold. There was no racing beat at the Herald Tribune, and I formed one because at the time I had a lot of vacation and they had a lot of money. Times have changed. So I got to go and cover racing in Dubai, in Hong Kong, in America, all over Europe, Germany, France, England, Italy, everything. And that was a great school for me, because what I did was I spent my time in the backstretch asking questions. Well, and the one thing that's funny is that everybody does it the only right way. Like, you go to America and you say, well, why are you putting those bandages on? They'll say, well, because you have to. This is absolutely, you cannot do this otherwise. And if you go to France and nobody's wearing bandages, but you have to do it this way. So everybody's doing it their way and everybody's right. So it's interesting that there's a lot of really, stubborn thinking in this business that has actually no basis in reality. And there's a lot, and it's very, despite being global and having the internet, it's very insular business. We do things a certain way in France, you do things a certain way in America, they do things a certain way in England, and they do not cross-pollinate. They really do. We're doing it the right way and everybody else is wrong.
Yeah. So you studied racing around the world as a journalist. Have you lived on a backstretch in America? Have you talked to a lot of American trainers? Do you know much about the game?
I don't. From the American perspective, I have to say no.
Wow.
What I learned from the American game was just one of my partner on the livestock beat at Night Ritter Financial News in Chicago was a very big bettor. We had to close those markets, and then we had to run across town to the OTB to get the opening race at Arlington Park. And he was fanatic about this. And so I started to learn from him and what he was looking for. So I learned from that angle more than the horseman's angle. And when I started learning the horse side of it, I realized how much of a gap there is there between people who bet and people who do the work and who know the horses. And then I learned a bit more covering them. I've done the Breeders' Cup when it was Arlington Park, a couple of Breeders' Cups at Santa Anita. But I have to say, what I know about American racing is from the outside. I've never worked there and I've never lived on the backstretch. I've talked to a lot of people, especially on the Lasix issue and the medication issue, because that's, we can talk more about that, but that's one of my passionate issues. And I tried to understand it, as a journalist, trying to keep an open mind and trying to say, okay, explain to me really why you need to do this way. And so I really did try to learn as much as possible when I was, hanging around in barns around the world talking to people.
So I read online where France is a lot better in many ways for the horsemen, because the purses, I guess, were 6 times higher. This is articles like 6-7 years old, but I guess a lot of Americans probably don't realize how different the game is probably played in every jurisdiction. When you look at it all in all, which jurisdiction do you think gets it right mostly? I know you like Hong Kong racing a lot, which I followed a little bit during the lockdown, because it was one of the few jurisdictions that were running. But generally, what jurisdictions get racing right?
I think I have an enormous respect for Hong Kong, because I think in Hong Kong, bar none, you have the cleanest racing in the world. They test everything and they look for things that nobody else is finding, but they can afford to do that because they have a very closed environment and a very small horse population, and everybody, everything is run by the jockey club and everything is approved by the jockey club. So if you need a vet, it's a jockey club vet, it's a track vet, everything. The facilities are amazing, the testing is amazing. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for the way racing is run there. I wouldn't necessarily I think it'd be really impossible to train or be a jockey there. People tend not to last very long because you're really under a microscope. Every move you make is scrutinized and watched, and it's just so regimented that I think that's the downside of Hong Kong racing. The reason it's so clean is because they watch you so closely. But I mean, you can't breathe in Hong Kong without without them knowing how much. There's an upside and a downside. I think for the horses, it's a complicated environment. It's a high stress environment. They do have some really nice facilities now that they're building that would surprise you, I think, in terms of spelling and turnout in their other facilities, off track facilities. But the on track training life of a racehorse is pretty intense there. So I respect them, and I think that's really cool what they do. But I necessarily wouldn't want to be a horse there for too long. I think we get a lot right in France. We're not perfect. We've got our problems too. France, the training facilities, I train in Chantilly, and it's just, I've never seen a training facility like this anywhere in the world. I think it's absolutely the best in the world. We have just miles and miles and miles of gallops of every size and configuration, uphill, downhill, every surface. Such a choice of surfaces and tracks to train on here. It's just amazing. Newmarket I love Newmarket because it's the cradle of racing. It's where it was all born. But as a training facility, I prefer Chantilly. I think France gets it right on the doping front. Absolutely nothing allowed in the horse on race day medication. And we can talk more about whether that's really true and whether people cheat. Yes, people cheat. People cheat everywhere. People cheat in America. They cheat in France. They cheat. They try to cheat in Hong Kong. I don't think they can do it, but I think they probably could try. I mean, where there's horses and money, there's going to be somebody trying to get an edge, and that edge is always going to push the line of what you can do, I think. So, I mean, I think that every jurisdiction can always do more to try to clean up racing and try to catch the cheaters. And I think it's extremely hard to do, but I think we have to make it job one everywhere. France is trying, and they've had some high profile cases in the last couple of years, and I think you're going to see a few more of those. But they get a lot right here. I think if I was going to be a horse and choose where I could be a horse in training and racing, it would be France.
But I read somewhere where you said that the British rules about steroids were more strict than France. They even had more, but this was 6-7 years ago. Maybe things have changed. But I understand that you were commenting that the British rules were even stricter towards certain types of substances.
I don't remember saying that. It's possible. I know they're very strict. Our rules are very strict too. I mean, no steroids anywhere. The question is always going to be traceability. Once a foal is on the ground, the question is going to be, how soon can that animal come under Jockey Club or France Gallo or British Horse Racing Authority regulations on what you can test? I mean, now the sales companies are picking up the ball and they're testing. And I think, I don't want to sound naive. I don't think there's a lot of steroids used here because there's a lot of testing, and there's testing going into sales all the time. The yearling sales market, though, is not my expertise, I have to say. So, but I know that's always the question. Where can you test? What can you test? We had a situation in France, and probably you have had in America as well. There's a drug called Tildren. It's a biophosphonate. It's a controversial drug, and at one point it was being given systematically to yearlings, which is insane. And it was being given systematically to yearlings here. Now the metabolite of that drug stays in the horse's system you can detect it years later. So now we know, and it's prohibited in any horse in France. It's prohibited in any horse under 3 years old, which is good. But I mean, that's just to show you that, yeah, the rules are strict. We have to be able to enforce them. That's the thing.
Well, you mentioned Lasix and your views on Lasix. No, I've been in the horse game before, and I hated using Lasix in the summertime because it didn't make any sense to me. Why would you give a horse a diuretic when it's very, very warm outside? But I didn't ask too many questions, and it's pretty much accepted that Lasix it makes horses run faster because they bleed less, and they have less breathing problems. But I was never convinced. What are your views on Lasix, and do you think it should be banned?
I think it should be banned. I think that my view on that has been pretty clear for a long time. But the problem in America is that you've got a system that is so unhorse friendly that I can understand the people who say, well, you don't understand racing here, little girl from France. We have to have it here. And in a way, they're kind of right, because you have dirt tracks on a tight oval. You have mostly sprints. Every track is the same. Horses live on the track. The air quality is shit. They're being walked around the shed row and taken out. They don't see any grass, with some exceptions. I know Tampa Bay has some, but the environment is really not horse friendly. So it's kind of a miracle. You don't have longer races, you don't have stayers races, you don't have big galloping tracks. You have these tiny little ovals that they're stuck on, going the one direction all the time, which is another insane thing. So I think in order for you to ban Lasix successfully and for the horses not to need it, quote unquote, you've got to change the system of how American racing works. And I don't see any move to want to do that. And especially from the gambling aspect, look at the information you have. Every horse is training on the same surface, the same direction, the same day. They're being clocked. You've got all these numbers, these speed figures, these things that just do not exist in Europe. But for a gambler, I can see why you like these things. So it'd be harder to have that kind of information if the configuration of the track changed, or if the horse was spending more time training on a farm and being trucked in and this sort of thing. You won't be able to see, but your structure of the way you need timed workouts and the way horses need to be training in that environment makes it difficult. Now the problem is that how are you going to police that? It used to be, remember back in the old days, your horse had to scope and show that it needed Lasix, that it actually was a bleeder before you could use it.
Right.
And then, of course, what happened? Of course, people cheated and they took their Kleenex and they look, it's bleeding, and and all this in New York, the last holdout finally allowed it, because if you give it to some, you have to let everybody have it, and we know it's a performance enhancing drug. So if you're not using it and the guy in the gate next to you is using it, you've lost your edge. So I mean, you either have to ban it or not, and I think the answer clearly for horse health is to ban it. But if you look in America at how the number of starts has decreased per horse since Lasix was in wide use, it's pretty dramatic. It takes a hell of a lot out of a horse to recover from that all the time. So it's a false economy to say that you're helping the horse, and I hear a lot of argument, oh, the little people would be run out of business if we didn't have Lasix. It's a false economy. Your horse can run half the numbers of races it should be running, because it has to recover every time from its dose of Lasix. That's how I think about it.
Right. Well, you mentioned one of the impediments to banning Lasix is the bettors, the information that bettors want, and kind of the homogeneity of our racing. It makes it easy for the information to get to the people that are betting. You don't have great information about the horses in France and in England as well?
I have American owners that complain incessantly about how you can't find out anything about these horses. Yeah. Because first of all, in 15 years of training, 20 now, I've never seen anybody with a stopwatch. Nothing here is timed anywhere, because we're not racing against the clock. We're racing against each other, and we're all training on different surfaces. And our race courses are, in France, we're mostly racing on turf. We have 7 or 8 synthetic tracks that we race on in the wintertime. We have a series of racing on the synthetic tracks. We have no dirt racing, with the exception of one small sand track out in the country in Pompadour. And every one of those race courses has a different profile. Some are flat, some are not flat, some are uphill, downhill, left-handed, right-handed, straight lines, 1 turn, 2 turn. A small track for us is your standard size track with a 2-turn mile. But everyone is different, and then because we're all on turf, the ground makes a huge difference. We've had drought this year, so they're running on quicker turf than they would be. Or the horses that need heavier ground. You have to know what kind of ground the horse wants, what kind of profile of the track the horse wants. So really, if you're gonna bet here, you've got to really follow the horse's career of where it's running and where, which track is performing better, and not only which track, but what month, what was the ground? Was it rainy? Was it dry? Was it, what kind of ground does it want? So it's hard work to be a gambler in France.
Wow. Well, that sounds like opportunity to me, because if you put the work in, you get an advantage. Here, there's so much information, and the information is everywhere, and the money comes in with that information. That's really hard to get an edge. And so in a way, that sounds exciting. It sounds exciting. And I know some American players that are excited about playing overseas. What about your schedule? Not just daily schedule. You mentioned being based in Chantilly. Do you live nearby and you're always there? Or is it like in America where certain trainers ship throughout the country, different parts of the year?
We all ship everywhere. And it's not, I mean, we don't have specific meetings like, okay, we're racing in Chantilly for 2 weeks and racing at Longchamp for 2 weeks. The racing is everywhere every day. So I can be at Chantilly today and Lyon 6 hours from here tomorrow, and Fontainebleau 3 hours from here the day after that. You truck your horse in the morning of the race, you find your where your box is, you bring all your stuff, and that's your thing for the day. And everybody does that. There's no on track training here, with two exceptions. One is in the south, a race course called Cagnes-sur-Mer, which is next to Nice. They have a winter season, a 6-week jump racing season, followed by a 6-week flat racing season. And then we all ship down and stay there and train on the track and at the facilities there for 6 weeks. Very kind of American style. We live there and train there for 6 weeks. I'm not going this year, but I've gone every year. It's really a great meeting to go to. And we also have the training center in Deauville. Essentially they're training on the track in Deauville because they have gallops inside the main track, but they're on the race course in Deauville. Now the barns there are almost a backstretch sort of American style, off the track. You can go to the beach to train, but most people are training on the track in Deauville. So those are the two exceptions. But even the Deauville people who are based in Deauville and training on the track there, they're trucking their horses all over France to run wherever the racing is that day.
There's a famous French movie starring Jean Gabin, Le Gentleman d'Epsom, and it takes place. He's at Deauville. It's a great movie, 1950s, and he's a racetrack tout. It's just a classic movie, and it's been redone. In America, it was redone as the what was it called, the Lemon Drop Kid, and then in France they redid it as My New Partner, Le Repos. But anyway, it's a great racetrack. At least it was in those movies.
It is a great race course, and actually we're up there. They have an all weather track there as well now. So we do a lot of winter racing up there on the all weather tracks. As a matter of fact, I'm headed up there tomorrow with two. So,
that's exciting. Well, in America, generally, owners, trainers get their horses through private sale, through auctions, and also through claiming. Is it any different in Europe?
It's exactly the same. We probably have, I know we have far, far fewer claiming races than you do because the whole American system seems to be built on claimers. Luckily, I mean, I like the claiming races. I claim a lot of horses. I really like to buy that way, but it's nice to have opportunities not to have to run a claimer. So we have a huge handicap system as well. A series of, handicapped races. So an average racing card here might have 3 handicap races, 1 claimer, 3 conditions races, maidens, what you would call maiden special weights, that sort of thing. But maybe only 1 claimer, or 2 or 3 on the outside. But there's not a series of claimers every day that you're stuck running when you want to keep your horse.
Now I understand that the claiming game is different. Historically in America, it was let the buyer beware. So if you dropped the claim and he broke down on the track, he was yours. Anything that happened, the purse would go to the previous owner, but everything else that happened would belong to the new owner. Now there are some protections from the new owner, so they tried to insulate some of those risks from the new owner. I understand the claiming game is different in France. You guys don't claim like we claim.
No, we don't claim like you claim. We claim after the race and not before. So we drop the slip after the race. What happens here is the horse is in for a specific price, like it is for you. Let's say 10, 12, or 14,000, with the higher price carrying the heavier weight. So the trainer chooses when they drop that horse in, it's worth 10, it's worth 12, it's worth 14, or there's usually three price levels in every claiming race. The race is run. And then after the race, the claim box is open for about 20 minutes. And after the race, the first 7 finishers have to walk around for a few minutes after the race so that you can have a look at them. All the boots and bandages, if they're wearing anything, has to come off. You have to be able to have a look at the race, how it came out of the race, and they get walked around for about 10 minutes, and you have a look, and then you can go and drop your claim slip. And the claim, unlike in America, if a horse is in for 10,000, that's kind of the base price in a silent auction. So everybody's filling out. It's like a poker game. It's kind of fun actually, because you fill out your claim slip and you have a bid. You like the horse. Let's say the horse that was in for 10 grand finished a nice flying second in the stretch. Perfect. It hasn't won. It's not going to go up the handicap mark. It looks like it's sitting on that win there. I'm going to buy that one. But it ran really well, so I might not be the only one looking at that one. There might be 4 or 5 other trainers looking at the same horse. And so you're kind of watching who's around the claim box, what's going to happen here. And then you got to decide, well, how much do I have to spend to get that horse? Because we don't all just put in 10,000 and you shake for it like you do in America. You put in a bid, 10,000 is the floor. So that horse that's in for 10,000 might sell for 16 or 17 or 18 or 20, depending on how well it ran and how many people are interested in it. So I have to decide what I'm willing to pay, put in that on my slip. Don't let anybody else see it. Fold it up, put it in the box. And then they open the claim box and then they read out all the bids publicly, and then the high bid takes the horse home. Now, is it still buyer beware? Absolutely. I mean, there, stable vices, things like that. You obviously you try to find out as much as you can about the horse you want to buy beforehand, but you're always going to get surprises, good ones and bad. Claiming game is a claiming game, and they're in those claiming races for a reason, in that, they're willing to risk losing them. You can defend your horse with putting in a friendly claim.
Oh.
So if I'm stuck with entries, maybe my horse is kind of over handicapped and I don't have a race for it, and it's like, oh well, we'll put it in the claimer, and if it runs well, we'll try to defend it a little bit. So let's say I put my horse in for 14,000 and he ran really well, and we kind of want to hang on to it. I got to see who's kind of scouting the claiming area, and I might want to defend it for, let's say we're going to put in 18 to defend it. So that means that if there are other bids below mine, I have to pay the difference between the 16 and 18. That goes back to the jockey club. So I have to buy my horse back for $2,000 so that I keep it. If there's other bids above it, well, then I lose the horse. That's how that works.
Wow. So it's an auction.
Essentially an auction, a silent auction.
Yeah. Do you like that system better than our system, where you
obviously day and night better, because you don't have to make your decision until after the race. So it's better for the horses too, because it doesn't encourage trainers to drop horses into claiming, saying, well, listen, he kills himself on the track, I don't care, it's no longer my problem. It's you don't know if somebody's going to claim that horse or not, and I like the system. I like the system a lot.
Right.
I like the system a lot.
Now, your owners, do many of your owners, have they played the game in America? Do they ever tell you which is better? And where do you get your owners?
Where do I generally? Need more of them, by the way.
Yeah, that sounds
exciting. I get them. Well, you get them. They're mostly, I have some Americans, English, German. Over the years, people have read my stuff. They kind of know who I am. I have a YouTube channel now that started this year, and I'm despite being a very small trainer, I'm kind of well known. So I get my owners kind of that way. Every once in a while, one flies over the transom, but they're mostly international. A couple of French people. French people tend to they have no reason to come to me. Anglophones and people who don't speak French, they have a reason to come to me, because the most important thing about owners is that you have to like your trainer, and you have to have good communication, because you have to trust me. And if you don't trust your trainer, every time that training bill comes, you're like, you have to trust your trainer. You have to have good communication. And that's my owners are looking for that. The Americans, one of my American owners owns horses. He has part of a Team Valor horse. He's in several syndicates in America. And he's also a gambler. So he knows. And he's always saying, well, he loves French racing for certain reasons, but hates it for others, and the same thing. So there's no perfect system,
Yeah. You really have to trust your trainer, because it's hard to make important decisions about assets if you can't trust them. And a lot of times it's not that people are trying to lie to you. Sometimes they don't want to hurt your feelings. Sometimes they think, well, he's not going to understand, and I can take care of this. I have his best interest in heart. There are so many aspects of a trainer-owner relationship that are important to manage, and it's really important to get that trainer aspect correct. In America, the smaller trainers every year are getting squeezed, and the bigger trainers get bigger and bigger. The mega trainers get bigger. They buy horses, they claim horses from the little guys who can't use as much medication, or they have to put horses in where they can win, because it's just the way it is. Is it like that in France and also in Europe, in that the big trainers dominate?
Yeah, I think it's a worldwide phenomena, and you can understand. I mean, the thing is when a new owner comes into the game, and they say, oh well, listen, I'll go to this guy. Look at those numbers. I think one of the things, the difference between Europe and America, is that the American super trainers they don't run a race they can't win because they need to make those numbers look beautiful. So they run their races in the morning, they wait for the perfect entry, and maybe your horse only runs 4 times a year, but damn it, it's going to win. But they're winning at 20-30%, which is insane. It's impossible, honestly. So what new owners look at is they're like, oh, my horse is trained by, let's pick a name, Todd Pletcher, somebody, one of the big guys. Todd Pletcher doesn't know what color your horse is, but that's okay. You can say that at cocktail parties because he's got, how many hundreds of horses in training in all over the country. Yeah. There's a system. He has assistant trainers. This is, if you have one horse and you're a small owner, you go to a place like that because you've heard the name and the numbers certainly look good. But what you don't realize and what we don't know is the breakage rate and how many horses those trainers go through that you never see, you'll never hear about. The numbers look fantastic, but you don't know what it takes to get to those numbers. So I understand a new owner just gravitating toward the known, and they don't want to take a chance. Who's this little trainer? Well, who is? I never heard of them. And the other big problem obviously is bloodstock agents. Bloodstock agents are not going to take a risk. They're here to spend your money, and they're not gonna send it to some unknown trainer and say, well, why don't you use this guy? He's, knows what he's doing. No, they're going to go straight to the big name. It happens in France too. I mean, we've got 5 big trainers at the top of the heap, and the little ones are absolutely getting squeezed out. There's no question about it. But if you look at the numbers too, smaller trainers, we don't run grass gallops and gallop the legs off them in the morning because we need to preserve the horses we have. So maybe we run a race that we don't have a chance, but we need a handicap mark, or we need to do this, we need to do that. So we don't have that win percentage because we're running races that we know we're not gonna do that well in, because there's a reason to run that race, maybe to sharpen them up for an objective 3 races down the road. But that doesn't make your numbers look so good, does it? So that's no, it's very hard to get people to have confidence in a trainer they don't know or haven't heard of. New owners that, and of course the syndicates, the rise of the syndicates, they're not going to take any chances either. It's like, oh yeah, we'll send it to, whatever, fill in the blank, because it's just what you do. And again, and it goes back to, do we ask questions in this sport? No, that's the way we do it.
Well, when I was reading about you as well, I noticed a trait that I like a lot. You like to buy low and sell high. Makes sense, right? So you'd buy a horse, you bought a couple horses for 10, 20, 30, and done really well. And to me, that's what the game is all about. A lot of folks, when they get in the game, it's approached completely the opposite. They want to buy a horse for 50 or 100 or whatever, because if it doesn't go well, you can run them for 35 and you can lose them. So it gives them kind of almost like a safety latch. And I've never liked, buying an asset that I know seems overpriced at the very beginning. But a lot of people play especially the claiming game that way. They want to claim horses for a lot of money because they figure, well, we can at least drop them and get something for them. What do you think about that? Do you agree with me that there is less risk to that strategy, but when you lose, you can blow a lot more money that way?
Yes. And one of the things that people don't think about either is that they buy a horse and they think, okay, I bought a racehorse, and they don't understand that now you have to pay to train it. And some people don't put that into their equation. So they come to you and they say, well, look, I'm going to put this €100,000 really nice horse with you. You should train it for free. Like, no, it doesn't work that way. First of all, I don't think you need to spend a lot of money to buy a decent horse, but again, it depends on what kind of game and what kind of dreams you want to have. Clearly, if you want to buy 10 yearlings and dream of the Kentucky Derby, that's fantastic. But most people don't have the budget to do that, which is where the syndicates come in. So they're buying little bits and things like that, which is, again, squeezing out the smaller people. But there's a sweet spot. If you look at not enough work is done, or at least nobody's talking about it. What I'd really like is somebody to go through the yearling sales and take what these things have cost and tell us how much, and you'll just see the cost benefit go like this as those prices get back to the reality of what these horses ever earn on the race course. I love buying a claimer for 15 grand and winning 100,000. I claimed a horse last year for a Canadian owner. We paid 14,000 for her at the end of the season, a 2-year-old, and I won 92,000 euros with her this year. Won 3 races, and she's fantastic because she's just a little horse that just flies on the handicaps. Now she's gotten up to a rating where we're going to have to see what she can do with that. But those kinds of things are really fun because, first of all, it's my kind of training, and second of all, it's fantastic to take a horse. It didn't cost that much, and our first goal when we buy a horse is what we say in France. It has to pay son avoir. It has to pay its way. Mm-hmm. So my goal for all of my owners is finding a way that your horse will pay for its training fees. And if after 6 months that horse doesn't look like it's going to make the cut and pay for its training fees, then we got to have a discussion about, do you want to keep going, or what should we do to try to maybe get out of this strategy here and move on. But I'm a small trainer, so no owners aren't going to come to me saying, I just bought a $500,000 yearling, here you go. That's not going to happen. So I really learned to make the most of what I have. And I love buying horses between 15 and 30,000 and seeing what we can do with them.
When you claim these horses for relatively cheap price or buy them, what are some of the mistakes that you've been able to capitalize on? Like, for example, maybe they're running short races, they need to go long. Maybe they're go ahead.
Or backwards. Yeah.
Or backwards,
I've first of all, you have to look at where it's coming from. I claim a lot of horses that come from really big trainers. And if the horse doesn't look early on like it's going to be a stakes horse, it kind of gets shuffled to the pack, which is where, again, a small owner should pay attention. You don't have a Group 1 horse in your hands. Your horse is going to be used as the leader for all the good horses gallops, and it's going to be burned out that way. And that doesn't happen in a small yard, but it happens all the time in a big yard. So the key is to claim from certain trainers that I like to claim from, who maybe might not be paying so much attention to those, less talented horses. And the first thing I do when I get a horse in, when I claim a horse, is I work very closely with my vet. I've worked with him for 20 years. We say, okay, I got a new one coming in. So the first thing we do, X-ray everything, blood test, ultrasound if we need it. We do a sort of a control technique, as we say in France. We see what we have. We obviously, and we do the clinical work too. We trot it, flexion test, have a look, is he sore in the back? Do we see anything that jumps out at us? Then we look at the x-rays and see what we have. And then we have a roadmap, like, okay, this, he looks like he's trotting fine on that, but we may have to have, just have a look at that. So, watch that and look at this. And if we have to treat anything, we treat it, and then we go. And then that's the first step. And then we look at the distance the horse is running. I've claimed horses that were running too long and are actually sprinters, have won races with much shorter distances, and vice versa. Often changing the distance can change what's going on, or changing the surface. Maybe the horse needs heavy ground. It's been run on hard ground. Maybe the horse wants fiber sand. It's being run on turf that it's not liking. Maybe it's left-handed. It wants to run right-handed. We have those options here because we have so many different, program on so many different track surfaces. So there's a lot of tinkering that you can do. Now, mind you, the claiming game is what it is. You can still buy a horse that's a donkey. It does happen. There's some things we can't fix. I can't wave my magic wand for everything.
Yeah. Well, I think some would think it's a tougher strategy here in America because the bigger guys are using so much medication that if you get their horses, they may be, a couple $1,000 a month of medication to the horse. So I think a lot in America, a lot of folks would rather claim from a smaller stable where they may not be doing the kind of medication that the big guy is doing.
Yeah, I think in America it'd be much harder to claim horses as a small train. I think the pipeline goes the other way. That the big ones will claim yours. I would hate to train there for that reason. And I've seen the vet bills. I have an owner that had a horse in a syndicate, and she sent me the vet bill she got, and I showed it to my vet, and we just looked at it, and our jaws were on the floor. It's like anti-inflammatory, another one, an ulcer medication because of the anti-inflammatory, a second ulcer medication. I mean, they just stack these things. It's unbelievable how much stuff is in some of these horses, and it boggles the mind. And the problem is, if you talk to the trainer doing this, he believes to the bottom of his toes that he's doing the right thing for that horse. He loves that horse, and he's giving it everything he can. So it's just a different way of thinking. It's just, make no mistake. I use the vet. I treat what needs to be treated, but we don't do this systematic stacking of things just because, oh, well, he didn't get this yet. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Just unbelievable, Matt.
Yeah. What is the relationship between trainer and jockey? In America, you get a jockey that you like. He rides a lot. He or she rides a lot of your horses, and they may even be involved in the galloping in the morning. But definitely important workouts that they may be involved in. In France, you tend to stick with the same jockey, or is it depend on where you're going to run a particular day, or how does that work?
It depends on where we're going to run on a particular day. The program is becoming more and more dense, and like even as a small yard, there was a day this year that I had one horse running 6 hours from here in Lyon, one horse running 2 hours north in Lille, and those two flat meetings are going on the same day, which is kind of insane. So it's hard to find what jockey is where. Plus, because we travel all over the country, never underestimate the size of France. It's a really big country. We have to pay the travel costs, right? So you don't want to have one jockey come from Chantilly to ride in Lyon and he's only got the one ride. You're going to get whacked on the travel costs. So we want to make sure who's going to be there, how many rides do they have, and then after that, obviously and then the weight. A lot of the better jockeys can't do the lighter weights, so there's that. That's a big consideration here. Now our weights on the flat go from 50 to 60 kilos. You have to convert that into your money. Sorry.
130, about 130, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of the name jockeys that Barcelona, Guillaume, certainly Soumillon, those guys can't ride below 56. Mm-hmm. So maybe Barcelona can go a little bit lighter, 54. But you need to know what their weight is. And then when you get into the really light weights, we have the 1.5 kilo weight allowance for women jockeys, which, by the way, I think is a fantastic idea. It changed the world for women. They are getting so many rides here that they would not have gotten before, and they need the rides to get good, and they are getting good. So that's important. But if you're at 52 kilos at the bottom and you put a girl up, she's got to be able to ride 50.5, which some of them can do, but not all of them. I mean, tomorrow I've got 52 kilos in the handicap. I've got Marie Vallon, who is the top rider, one of the top in France. She's just broken her own record, 85 wins this year. And I'm really lucky to have her. And she's really light, so she's going to ride 51 kilos for me. So that's fantastic. So I like to stick with jockeys that I use often, that I have some kind of a relationship with, that have respect for the small trainers, because there are certain jockeys, they ride for the big guys all the time, or the stars. They come out and they're like, okay, right, what are we doing here? I want a relationship. I want a jockey on my horse who wants to be riding my horse, not Graffard's horse or Rouget's horse, my horse. So, but we have 300 to choose from, and as soon as, and you know how it works, it's the same as in America. When you get a little bit hot and the horse starts to show some form, the phone rings all the time. Oh, can this guy ride? Can that guy ride? And when the horse is just doing some prep races to get to something, the phone doesn't ring. So it's the same.
What's the relationship between the racing world and polite society? As you probably know, in America, like I don't talk about horse racing with people that aren't into it, because they don't understand it. They think you're some kind of degenerate or whatever. So I mean, it's different in some parts of the country. Like Saratoga's got that meet, Keeneland, Del Mar. It's part of the social scene of those areas. But generally, if you're into racing, you don't really talk about it amongst people because they don't understand. I'm not really sure how it is in the backstretch in America, but I have a feeling that it's just a different world. What about in France? Does the average Parisian know what's going on at the racetrack, and do they care? And do they look down on the racing game?
That's an interesting question, and it's an important one right now, because we struggle with this social license to operate. Right, we're in a time when people think they're vegan, and they people who have never been near an animal want to see them all set free to frolic in a field somewhere. So we have this whole increasingly urban society that has never seen an animal, a dog or a cat or a horse or anything, but yet they think they know what's good for animals. So that's a really important thing, and we can no longer underestimate these people, because there are more of them, and they're very influential, and they do not know or care or want to hear about horse racing. That's true. In France, we have it's interesting because the France has this daily ticket called the Quintet Plus, which you probably know about, and it was played for years like a national lottery. Parisians who are in the street in the Champs-Élysées and don't know which end of a horse eats know what the Quintet is, and because every day this was they announce, they don't know the names of the horses. They'll on every radio station, on every major media, they'll say, in the Quintet today the results are 11, 5, 13, and it's like a lottery. So in a way, that brings in a huge betting handle, so it's important. But the downside is it's bringing in it's bringing in what you would call stupid money, which is fine. It's money. I'll take anybody's money. But there's not much education about horse racing in polite society, as you say. And there's two, and in France especially, there's this big division between the horse part and the gambling part. And the gambling part is really seen as, oh, those people, those horse players, they're not well thought of, which is which is ridiculous. And then the rest of horse racing, no, we don't. Do we have a great reputation? Probably not. No, I think the average person, nobody comes racing in France. The stands are empty. In England, it's packed. In England, you have a culture, people go racing. It's part of the culture. And in France, it's really not. So we do have a problem with that. Yet we have a really good betting handle. We have the online betting is huge, and the what they call the PMUs. We have these off-track betting bars all over France, and they're hugely popular. So there's a lot of betting, and as you know, we have a big trotting scene as well. So the trotters trotters bring in more money than the gallopers, because the trotters are just the blue collars. People love the trotters in France much more so than the gallopers. The gallopers are considered to be the snobby elite, and the trotters are everybody's best friend. So, and it's easier to follow the trotters because they run more often and the favorites usually win. So it's a kind of a popular sport here. And more people will go to Vincennes, the trotting track, on a Friday night than you'll ever see it at Longchamp outside of Arcte. So it is a problem that we need to do something about. And that's one of the reasons at the urging of one of my owners, I started this YouTube channel last year, just to sort of try to shine a light on what this is, what we do. And I think more people really need to do that.
Yeah. Well, we talked a lot about France and a little bit about England today. What's the racing scene like in like Germany and Italy and other? I know they race in Scandinavia, I believe, as well.
Yeah. Scandinavia is really big in the trotters. They have gallopers there, but they have they're really known for the trotting, especially Sweden, Solvalla. Racing in Germany, racing in Italy is almost dead. They're really, really struggling. There's not much left there. And if you go to race, if you take a runner to Italy and you make money, you have to wait like 6 months to a year to get it paid. It's really, really struggling. I mean, it's sad because I mean I had a runner at San Siro. What an unbelievable race course, and that huge Da Vinci statue, and it's just lovely. And the stabling there is just so steeped in history, and it's really sad, but it's really, really going down quickly. There's not much left there. It's the government is not doing it any favors, and it's struggling. Germany, the problem is Germany has really low prize money, as does England. England, for being the cradle of racing, that their prize money is just appalling. So the only thing that's keeping English racing alive is Godolphin and syndicates, which is, if something happens, when something happens with Godolphin, they're going to be in real trouble there. But there's no prize money. The prize money is horrible in England, and that's why they come to France. I mean, French prize money is the best on the continent, and it gets paid. So there is that. We have a really good system there. Spain, there was almost no racing a couple of years ago. Then it started back up again. So there is some racing in Spain. I don't know much about it. I haven't raced there. I've raced in Germany and I've raced in Italy. But the Italian racing is really in trouble. German racing is holding on. It's a small group, but they are holding on, and it is popular. What's really nice is you go racing in Germany and people show up. It's a party, but they do it really right. There's stuff to eat, there's stuff to drink. It's a local, and the attendance is really good. So I hope it continues there.
It sounds like it has potential. So, well, look, Gina, last question. This has been great. I mean, you're a fascinating person, and you're just a wealth of knowledge. Do you have any handicapping tips to offer folks? Like I would pick up the European PP sometimes and try to figure something out. Are there any keys you think we should look for when we're betting, playing races in France?
Well, I can tell you, strangely enough, I can tell you a little about the trotters because it's important in the trotters to watch the thing they're doing with the shoes, because I don't know if you do this in America, but in France, one time they'll run a horse with 4 shoes, and the next time they'll pull them all, or they'll have only shoes in the front and not in the back. They do a lot of messing around with shoes, and all that's declared. So if you see a trotter and it's run, 5 times with 4 shoes, not so well, and this race they pulled all the shoes, bet it. So might be a in the gallopers. It's tough because it's pretty easy to bet the conditions races, that like the maidens and because the big houses tend to win. There aren't many surprises in those kinds of races. It's really tough to bet the handicaps, which is we have these full field 16 runner handicaps, and you look at it and you'll see that the current betting favorite, has 5 zeros behind his past performance and 1 third place 3 months ago. And you're like, how is that horse the favorite? Because what that trainer's been doing is he's been running down the handicap mark. So what the bettors have done is they've looked back to see what that horse's what the handicap rating was when that horse was running well. So maybe it won some races, the mark had gone up to, the numbers won't mean anything to you, but like, let's say 35, and it actually was winning at 28. And now it's run its way back down to about where it should be in the sweet spot again. So that's when you want to jump on it. So if that horse is a favorite, there's probably a reason for that.
That's like the old days of the racing form, and they only had 10 races, and some trainers would be very patient, and they wait till that nice race would fall off their PPs, and then they would drop them in price because they could get away with it for the claim. And that was go time. So it sounds like it's a little bit like those.
It's a little bit like that, and it's another reason that these win statistics for certain trainers, they don't make any sense, because for us we have such a handicap system that you sometimes have to run 4 or 5 times and know you're not going to be in the money because you need to get your rating back down. So, and that doesn't make your numbers look any better as a trainer, but it doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It means that you have to get your horse back into the sweet spot. So that's something to look about. And the claiming prices too. Yeah. Is the claiming price drop? The claiming prices are less important here than they are with you. There's such an emphasis on the claiming program where you are, that there's like, oh, this guy was running for 10, he's dropped down to 5. This is the day, and we don't do as much playing around with that. It's not much of an indicator here for betting.
Yeah. Well, Gina, again, this has been great. Like I said, you really understand the game really well. And it's obvious why Mark Kramer, always my favorite handicapping writer, Mark Kramer always talks about you, because you have a great grasp of the game. And I'm sure you're doing wonderful things with your horses. And I'm looking forward to following your horses the rest of the year. So maybe at some point we can do this again and talk about some of the other topics that are that we face in racing.
Good. That's fantastic. Sorry, I just had to hit my screen there. Just something went wrong with my phone. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and happy to talk with you. And Mark Kramer is a lovely guy, by the way. We love Mark Kramer.
Yeah. He's great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this has been great, Gina. Again, I hope you have a wonderful evening, and let's talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Okay.